Alright, hello everybody, and this is BC Dagger bringing you another Brood War Weekly cast. Last week I was sick, and so I'm really going to count this as my first official Brood War Weekly. That was kind of like the alpha and the beta combined, but now we're going to the actual product of this Brood War Weekly, where I kind of separated it up into 3 segments. And the first one was to address either really good foreign replays, or just try and bring about foreign aspects of StarCraft that you guys really may not be aware of. And so I've got a really cool one for you today. I promised it last week. And we're going to be looking at the map Queensbridge. And if you guys don't know what Queensbridge is, it's a map that was created by one of our Team Liquiders, Cardinal All In. And he makes a good amount of maps. I'm assuming it's a he. And so I apologize if you happen to be a woman. So Cardinal All In gave me this replay, and he said, "Here, why don't you show my map?" I said, "Oh, that's cool. That's a great idea. I like Queensbridge. It's a very, very cool map to look at visually, and I think to play on. So let's go ahead and take a look at the map and maybe address it a little bit, try and bring up some of the points before playing. And now let me take this image out here. Okay, so this is Queensbridge that you're looking at right now. And I wanted to just basically do an overall view, kind of gather my thoughts, and say, hey, before I play on this map, what would I try and think about from each view as the 3 different races? So obviously, if you're a Protoss player, let's go with Protoss in the PTZ network here. And so if we're looking at Protoss and we spawn down here at this bottom position, because this is a 2-player map, you can either spawn at the 1 o'clock here at the top right, or you could spawn at the 7 o'clock down at the bottom left, which means that naturally you're going to go to this position here and take your natural. So if this was a PVZ, you typically go for a Forge Expand, and this gap right here is pretty wide to defend with a Forge Expand. But if you do it right and you can get your Forge out here and space out your gateway between the pylon, you are able to get a pretty decent wall. You may need to add an additional cannon just depending on what kind of pressure you have at this natural base. Another good option is to go for 2-gate. I know it's not as popular, so we don't really need to go into how 2-gate could work as much. But if you're going to want to Forge Expand, you have to make sure you put your cannons and your gateway in the right position to block off as much as possible. Otherwise, a really fast pool for Zerg can be pretty much your death sentence here. Now, as I was thinking about what would I do as I got into the later game if I wanted to take a 3rd base, you have really only 2 options. You could take this 3rd base over at the 9 o'clock, or you could take the base here at the 6 o'clock position. And I thought, okay, the 6 o'clock, hands down, this is what you're going to want to take. And PVT, I was actually in conflict of which one I would take, and we'll get to that in a second. But I think this is just definitely the safest one. It's the smallest surface area to attack from this right position, which is where the Zerg are going to try to come from. If they spawn there, they're going to try and come down this pathway to the right and get up this ramp. But if you make your base right here, there's so much surface area between this area and this area for attack, especially if it's going to be maybe a 6-hatch Hydra. That 3rd base is going to go down so fast, they're not going to be able to defend it well. So definitely in PvZ, I think this is the optimal base you want to take for your 3rd. Now, as far as what are your options to attacking your Zerg opponent if they do spawn at this location, typically they're going to take this natural here and then look for a 3rd base basically across the map where they could put lurkers to go on a good defense. That's definitely possible if they wanted to do a lurker defense at this base down here. But I would assume that a Zerg would try and work their way literally down from the top right here to the bottom right. So if that's the case, you're going to have a lot of opportunities, since the distance between this base and this base isn't actually that long, especially if you get speed zealots with that +1. And you could go for a lot of harassment here. But look at the spot right here. This is a good position if you decided to go in for drops for Storm later in the game. But also what I thought was a good mid-game unit, instead of going for Zealot into High Templar, is that Dragoons would be pretty good units in this map because of all this high ground open surface area here. And so while people try and go towards primarily Zealots, double click there, and I really think that Dragoons, because of this high ground, you can control the middle of the map a lot more if you do go for Dragoons. Hello everybody joining in. I can hear you guys chatting in the background. So that was my verse Zerg for Protoss on this map, and I think for verse Terran, it is kind of very similar, where you still obviously want to take your natural here, and I do think that the third is the best. I ended up watching the replay that Cardinal All-In sent me, which is a PVT, and before watching that game, I thought, oh, this would be perfect to take as a Protoss player, because tanks can kind of control this area here, and they might try and hit your units at the third base and go for a really hard contain. But little did I know that this ground surface area was way too strong. The tanks moved in there. Vultures had basically free flight to get in here and attack this probe line. So taking this base as your third could be very difficult against a meching Terran. So my suggestion as a Protoss player, take this third here. Also, when you want to go into the late game in PvT, you should probably go for Arbiters instead of Carriers. There's no good positioning for your Carriers to stay away from Goliaths. Their range is going to be too strong. So if you go for Carriers, I think you're rather foolish, or you just want to build Carriers because you think they're pretty cool. So that's my synopsis for PvZ and PvT. I'm going to skip mirror matchups. So as a Zerg player, so let's envision that the Zerg player does spawn at this 1 o'clock position. And what are you going to want to do versus Protoss? Basically, you want to take your natural here again, but what are your options for taking a third base? And I think that these bases here are just definitely designed for taking your third base. And like I said, in most 4-player maps, a Zerg player will try and find the main base of an empty spawn location on the 4-player map and go there. But since this is a 2-player map, there really isn't that kind of structure where you can play defensive across the map. So as a Zerg player, I still think that if you take this, you might be a little bit more defensive because you can guard up this ramp, and so it'll be harder to get your units up. Meanwhile, this location, it's so wide open that not until you get to your mid-game army will you be able to defend it a little bit better as a Zerg player. Now, if your Protoss opponent is obviously going to be spawning at this bottom left location, taking the natural, and maps where you can see this gap behind the mineral line on the natural, that should just make you just be thirsty for lurker drops. If you research drops and you can get your lurkers into here, it's going to wreak havoc upon your opponent. And later on, now that you have drops, while you're distracting your opponent here, you could gather a Hydralisk army, a Hydralisk and Zerg army, put them in your Overlords, and just ferry them across to this location. There's so much surface area. This isn't a Terran player where there's just turrets lined up across. Generally, a Protoss player will not have cannons lined up at this ridge here. So I think that this will really favor drops if you wanted to go for that location here. I'm trying to remember what other maps are very similar in design at this location, but that they all basically played out the same way as far as drops really work here. And then as far as going to the later game, I definitely would suggest that Defiler tech is used. Using that Dark Swarm on these large surface areas is going to help you out in just troves as you try and crush your Protoss opponent. And yeah, I'm gonna get the Mutaplay because I think Mutaplay is really good in the VT in the verse Terran aspect of this game. So of course you're spawned up here at the top right, and I think you should obviously again take your you could take the 5th base here, or take your 3rd base here at the 12 o'clock location. But since you go for lurkers for defense, typically in ZVT, if you take this down here, Terran's going to have a lot of trouble trying to get across this bridge. Even though it's not on the high ground, it's still pretty difficult to try and take this 5 o'clock base. So you kind of have your options here, but I would, as a Zerg player in ZVT, actually take this bottom right location, because I like to work linearly and try and take a side of the map. And the problem is, if you get forced to take the 3rd base here, your 4th base, if there's a split horizontally on this map in ZVT, your 4th base is going to be stuck taking over here at the top left. And so that's why you kind of want to push yourself towards the right, where you can have all your bases in a closer, more accessible location than having your 4th base be stuck all the way over here to the top left. So if you open up with Mutas, Mutas can attack really well from this blue space here where the water is behind the natural base. And what you can do later with your Mutas is morph into Guardian play. And Guardian play is something that's been a little bit more common, I feel like, in the foreign scene. So your Guardians could basically just wreck this Terran natural base. And you can even put your Guardians over here and try and push across, or maybe if there is no base here for the Terran player, I feel like the turret line is going to be a little bit stronger, so you might have a lot of trouble trying to go in with Guardians later on. But Mutas can definitely be good at poking in from this side and from up here, but eventually I would say definitely go for Guardians. And you may, depending on how the Terran player plays and they turtle on 2 bases, try and take a fast fourth. See if you can get away with it, because that could really boost your economy. So as a Terran player, Terran I feel like are going to love this map. There's so much space on high ground at these 2 crucial locations here that if you can control that with your tanks, you're going to be in such a great position. So again, if you're a Terran player and you want to take your 3rd base, this is definitely the best location. If you spawn here, this is your best location here at the 12 o'clock and the 6 o'clock. Because basically you can put your tanks on the high ground and hit anything that's coming from this side or this side pretty easily, as long as you have good vision or you have energy on your comsat stations. So you can kind of control that. And if you're playing against a Zerg player who's on 2 bases, and they took their 3rd way down here at the bottom right, kind of how I was mentioning earlier, where you want to try and push your Zerg opponent upward so they're forced to take this top portion of the map, you can put a tank contain right here on this road, and it's going to be really hard for them to reinforce from their natural and main base to that 3rd base all the way down here. If you have a nice siege contain, you can put some tanks up here and right here and just kind of have a split contain, and then basically the Zerg's going to be in a lot of trouble. So that's kind of the thing you can exploit against Protoss players also, because if your Protoss opponent spawns over here and they decide to take this base, you can hit the front of this base, any buildings that they put here, with scans and siege tanks. But you can also, I'm pretty sure you can put your tanks here and siege up on that on the assimilator if the Protoss player has the gas being mined. So either way, with both races, Vulture run-bys are going to be very easy at this map here. You have 2 really wide locations where you can run your Vultures in, and mining up this map is going to be really crucial, because even though you can take these high grounds, since there's a lot of surface area to attack on the left and right, if you do not mine up very well, the tanks can die off really quickly. So you want to make sure you can take care of that. And so that's kind of the synopsis for the 3 races here. And let's go ahead and watch a PVT and see what's going on. Let's see. Okay, I am just let me show you this image here while I get everything together. Alright, and now we have a look at our first game that you guys may have ever seen on Queensbridge. And I know that there's actually another map called Kingsbridge. I haven't taken a good look at it yet, so do not be confused. And as we go into this game, just try and point out some notes here. I got some things written down. So this is, it looks like there's 4 players on this map, but no, only Matt and Dano are playing each other. Matt is going to be this Terran player at the top right. Meanwhile, the spawn location for the Protoss player down at the bottom left, which is Dano. And that's going to be kind of a hard name to say fast if I was shoutcasting this game. But fortunately, I am not. But let's go ahead and see how these players open up. We don't need to have everything on slow speed. So right now, staying on 1 base, the Protoss player, you don't really want to go for a fast expand on this map anyway. Generally can't get away with it. And as for the Terran player, as we were looking at that map, I guess I wanted to say that I think versus Protoss, you definitely want to go for siege expand because of how wide that areas here is to defend. And if you only have a bunker in the middle, you can either just run a series of dragoons and zealots by, or try and pick it off pretty easily here. So a bunker wouldn't be very good defensively. So when you want to go for that expansion, go for siege expand, which it looks more like the Terran player Matt is going to be going for here anyway. So he has a pretty solid concept of how to play on this map. Both these players are really good. I'm not sure what their rankings are, but after viewing this game, I can tell that their skill level is pretty up there, and you can see that their early game APM is doing pretty good too. So it seems just trying to get that aggravating probe out of the base here. So some decent micro so far. And then, of course, generally, as usual for the Protoss player, going for that range upgrade and using Dragoons because they are one of your most powerful units in this matchup. Finally, the Nexus is going down. And so early on here, it looks like Matt decided to go for some sort of biomech push. And that's a pretty... I think the biomech can pay off, and especially with this wide area here again, it's so much harder to defend because there's not much of a choke. And usually you can defend more on a bridge. If this were Fighting Spirit, this double bridge area would be closer to the natural location, but it's so far out that the opponent, the Terran opponent, actually has time to get their units across it and attack on the natural base. So we all know that's going to come along, so let's speed up to that attack here. And it looks like it's time for the Terran opponent to move out. So we're going to see a little bit of a showcase here where a superior army versus really good micro is about to go down. This is like a Flash versus Bisu style matchup here, where Flash has the superior army and then Dragoons kick ass. So it doesn't look like the odds are in the Protoss player's favor. A decent amount of Dragoons here. But the Spider Mines are out, and if they get off some good hits, he could die pretty quickly here. Tanks are ever so strong, even without siege mode here. And it looks like he got another tank picked off, but the Dragoon's down to 3 now, and he's going to have to go for some sick mine micro here to try and survive this. Nice pick off on that mine right there. So I think that a Vulture actually got in here. Being unmicroed though. Meanwhile, at the front, the action that has gone down. Bringing an SCV here. He's trying to hug a Marine apparently. And finally a bunker set up at the front. So this is Flash because we know that bunkers like to be put right next to that natural nexus. Unfortunately, the observers are out for a Protoss player, otherwise these mines would just be infinitely more troublesome. And with that range upgrade, he will end up pushing out this army. So really good job to kind of keep us calm and fight his way out of this kind of bad predicament here. So Dano is a D-ranked player, but hey, he's doing pretty good for D-rank. And look at this. I like what he does is he gets his Dragoons on the outside to maybe pick off anything reinforcing on the right to prevent flanking. And he outranges this bunker, which he will be able to pick off, killing off the SCVs first. And it looks like the Nexus will survive. Oh, and unfortunately that observer just suicided into the turret before it got taken out. And this is called the 1 siege tank 2 mine contain here. Let's see how long that actually stays worthy of defending. Oh, D-ranked Korean. But everything kind of calms down. But that will give us the opportunity here to see that the command center mining with the refinery here. An additional command center going to the third. And like I said earlier, this is where you want to take the third as a Terran player. And it's a really easy to defend third because you got the high ground and a couple siege tanks can defend both sides. But since you're going to have a lot of defense here anyway, you're not going to have to worry about attacks from the right side too much. But after picking off this mine, an unfortunate death of 2 Dragoons to do that, he will go ahead and build his Nexus at that 3rd location too, at the bottom right. So now let's zoom forward here, because it's going to be quite some time before we're going to see some more attacks. Hello, Fear the Queen. Fear the Queen submitted one of the nuke replays we will be watching later. If you guys don't know, today's theme is Dr. Nuke. And that's where you try and do Dr. Seuss stuff while launching nukes. And it will be great. So it looks like the 3rd command center is about to come down here, and I know that we're not going to see another action until the 14-minute mark, so let's push on. You can see that the 4th base is trying to be taken here, and as I mentioned earlier, you're going to have a hard time as a Protoss player defending against these Vulture run-bys. And we are zooming forward one more time here. A little bit of a Dragoon battle in the middle. But it looks like our Terran player is going to be maxing out very soon off these 3 bases. And now the death march should begin very shortly here from the Terran player. And we'll see just how powerful Mech is. Just slightly behind his micro here on the 2 probes. But he does have the 4th, even though this 4th has been up for, I guess, a minute or 2. There's not too much mining going on. He opted not to take that simulator just yet. Now he does. And a little just skirmish of Dragoons. I don't think they're going to do too much damage here. But look at all this mech in the middle, just hanging out. Vultures are so cruel. They think just because they're on the controllers are on bicycles that they're better than everybody else. I guess they call them motorbikes. And now Dano, he's going to try and just go for a mine-sweeping opportunity here, but I thought the mech did move out very shortly. You can see that there's mines kind of covering the right side of the map. The more mines you lay out, separated up, the more you have vision on the map. So when you have this many Vultures, you really don't need to just keep them chilling inside of your base. You know, go out there, be a little bit bold, and gain more vision. Quadruple kill on those Dragoons. Pretty ridiculous. Alright, let's push forward. And don't you wish the game was played at this speed? How hilarious would that be? So that was really cool. What the Terran player just did there is to prevent the flanking, just laid down a whole bunch of spider mines. Meanwhile, pushing over to the left, he's going to have this huge surface area to attack that 4th base. You know, Protoss is going to realize, Ditto, he has no chance of getting up there on the high ground. This is what people were really concerned about on Queensbridge, is just that pure dominance with tanks meching on top of the ridge here. With the aid of the science vessels, that's going to be pretty difficult to deal with here. And it looks like Arbiter play. That was an amazing recall here. Meanwhile, it looks like the 4th is definitely going to go down for the Protoss player. So let's go look at the action here. The command center is getting lifted up at the same time. So both players trying to take out their additional base. Terran now down to 2 bases. Protoss down to 3. And at this point, with this many units, this could be really scary for Protoss to deal with. But Dano, he's got something up his sleeves, and I like to call them Arbiters here. And so some sick Arbiter play is about to come out. 2 beautiful stasis fields coming down. And I feel like Deneau loses way more army than he should to just a few more tanks that are left. Look at those clump zealots. It's like force fields in StarCraft 2 when they backfire against you. That's kind of what happens here. Unable to get his Dragoons in. Look how many units are getting hit by just that one tank. 6 kills. And it lived its purpose pretty well here. These tanks are not in siege mode, which is unfortunate for the Terran player because it cannot just lay down one giant volley before they all die. But there still is no base here. The command center is getting ready to finish off. But you see what I said. Only 2 siege tanks. They'll die off pretty easily here. And there's no, there was no scan either, so I wasn't able to see anything under the Arbiter cloaking. Something cool we're going to see later, guys, are ghosts. And if you did not know, you can use lockdown on an Arbiter, and an Arbiter will no longer cloak the units below it while in lockdown. So something you could utilize ghosts for. I'm trying to, after this episode, I'm going to push really hard for people to start using ghosts a little bit more because there's some really good utility to them. Imagine instead of having to use EMP, you just lock down Arbiters. How sick would that be? I think that's the way to go here. And unfortunately, lessons aren't learned. And another recall before the Arbiter dies. These are the most I've ever seen. Not many units inside with this recall, though. It will be enough to do some damage. Some units gathering inside the middle here. Meanwhile, the 4th is going to be taken back up again. So really well done by Deneau. And then the main is mined out. You would think that the Terran's in kind of a bad position here, but with the 2 bases here, even though the naturals are going to be mined out, this is the power of Terran. They can't lose, can they? And this is going to get low econ for Protoss too. Really, unless he can hold this 4th base, there's not going to be much mining for him, because that main and natural are out. So now we're going to speed up again, because I know that it gets a little bit lackluster, as we try and figure out the conclusion to this game and go into our Fun Day Monday on Tuesday portion. Unless you guys have a better name, that's what we're sticking with. This brave little observer going out. This probe trying to sell its soul for a Nexus. Something that I was thinking about as a Protoss player the other day is how sad is it when a pylon gets destroyed while you're getting warped in, if you're like a zealot, and you just have to sit there like in between like the ether world because you can't get finished warping in, but you're not allowed to go home unless they decide to cancel your warp in. Puts you in quite a predicament. So warping in isn't the best thing to do during the middle of the battle. But Deneau, he's got an opportunity here with a nice little stasis to bring these units in, but the background tanks, they're going to do some damage. 2 nice storms, but unfortunately it wasn't enough to kill them off quite yet. These zealots will definitely clean up the rest here. And that's going to be really one of the last attacks until the 24-minute mark here. Just using lots of vultures to pick off probes. Look at these guys. Just sitting there, kind of humping the ground. It's a little inappropriate. So Terra now taking this additional base down here. That's no problem. Obviously they win mech. They got the tanks available. And Matt does a really good job of macroing up in this game. Even though he's made some pretty poor engagements, and, well, I think that Deneau's made some pretty great engagements against this meching army here. It really hasn't panned out too crazy for him. And it's mainly vultures. A crazy amount of vultures. And 5 siege tanks, but 26 vultures are going to just try and peel their way against this army. And this is a Protoss opportunity here to try and win the game. Oh, I hope that there's a storm on top of these SCVs. How sick would that be, guys? Come on, let's see the conclusion to this. Storm! Storm! It doesn't happen yet. Meanwhile, that 4th base has been taken out again. That Nexus is down. The mech is moving in. There's not much army to defend here. Could this go into a base trade scenario? I think between these two armies here, this is the final clash. One of them will die and will not be able to macro up. There is not much in the way for Dano as far as minerals go. Decent bait for the Terran player here. Then the last slaughter here. Whoa. Whoa, cleaning it up. Cleaning it up. But still 118 supply to the 102 of the Protoss player. When we're going to zoom it forward to the death. It's kind of hard to observe when it's going this fast. I find it amusing. If you really want to be a pro observer, you got to watch it at this speed. I will list it on TL after this game. I do not care. Bam. Cleaning it up. Oh, poor Protoss. Didn't you feel like Dano maybe was going to carve his way back into this game? But he does tap out. GG. So that's a game on Cardinal all in. Guys, how cool was that? That was a great PvT. Late game PvT. So if you guys haven't played on that map, I suggest trying to bring it into the map pool a little bit more with your foreign players. And just take that and have a joy with some StarCraft games there. So that's Cardinal All-Ins, Queensbridge. And I'm going to go fix my stream to satisfy the viewers out there. And I guess not starting soon. I've already started. So let me fix it. And then we will jump into the next replay.